I've been married to my wife for 7 years. We weren't some fairy tale couple, but we were solid, at least that's what I kept telling myself. We both worked, paid bills, argued about stupid stuff like dishes and money, and made up the usual way. Nothing dramatic. Or so I thought. About 3 months ago, things started feeling off. Not explosively bad. Just wrong in quiet, uncomfortable ways. She became sharp with me over nothing, snapping if I asked how her day was, rolling her eyes when I tried to joke. Affection disappeared almost overnight. No random touches, no leaning into me on the couch. If I mentioned it, she'd accuse me of being needy or paranoid. She also got weirdly protective of her phone. Screen always face down. Notifications silenced. If I walked into the room, she'd tilt it away like I was about to steal state secrets. When I asked about it, she laughed and said I was projecting my insecurities and that I needed therapy. That was her favorite move, turning every concern back on me. I remember thinking, okay, maybe I'm just stressed. Maybe this is a phase. I wanted peace more than answers. Looking back, that was my first mistake. Once I noticed the distance, I couldn't stop seeing the patterns. She started working late 2 or 3 nights a week, but her paycheck didn't change. When I asked why, she said her company was restructuring, then later said it was just a busy season. The stories never matched, and when I pointed that out, she'd sigh dramatically and say I was interrogating her like a criminal. She began caring a lot more about her appearance, new clothes, new perfume, sudden gym sessions she'd never mentioned before. If I complimented her, she'd brush me off like my attention was an annoyance. If I didn't, she'd accuse me of not finding her attractive anymore. I couldn't win. One night she came home close to midnight, smelling like alcohol and that unfamiliar cologne. I asked where she'd been. She said, with co-workers. When I asked which ones, she snapped, "Why do you need names? God, you're exhausting." Then she went straight to the shower, phone in hand, and locked the door. That was the moment something settled in my chest, not proof, not certainty, just a heavy, sinking feeling that I was being lied to. I didn't want to believe it yet, but the trust one had in her started cracking for real. The turning point came on a Sunday morning. We were supposed to visit her sister together. She woke up already irritated, scrolling through her phone with that tight smile she'd been wearing lately. I asked if everything was okay. She didn't even look at me and said, "Why do you always ask that?" While she was in the shower, her phone buzzed on the nightstand. I wasn't trying to snoop, I swear, but the screen lit up, and I saw a message preview. "Last night was insane. Can't stop thinking about you." No name, just a heart emoji. My hands started shaking. I stood there staring at the phone like it might explode. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. When she came out, I asked her, calmly, who was texting her like that. She froze for half a second, just long enough to tell the truth without meaning to, then rolled her eyes and laughed. "Oh my God, it's just a joke from a coworker." "You're really reaching now." I asked why a coworker would send something like that at 8 in the morning. She snapped back that I was invading her privacy and that normal people didn't analyze every message. By the end of it, somehow I was the bad guy for not trusting her. But something had shifted. That message burned into my head. From that moment on, I knew this wasn't just in my imagination anymore. After that morning, I couldn't let it go. I didn't accuse her again, but I watched. I listened. And the lies got sloppier. She'd tell me she was going out with friends, then forget which ones she'd named earlier. She'd say she was exhausted from work, yet come home energized and oddly cheerful. One night, she left her laptop open on the kitchen table. A message popped up while I was walking past. This time I didn't look away. It wasn't explicit, but it didn't have to be. Inside jokes. Late night plans. Way too much familiarity for just co-workers. When I asked her about it later, she didn't even try to explain properly. She scoffed and said I was obsessed and controlling, that I was turning into someone she'd barely recognized. Then she dropped the line that really messed with my head: "If you were more confident, you wouldn't act like this." I remember sitting there thinking, how did I become the villain in my own marriage? I was questioning my reality, replaying conversations, wondering if I really was overreacting. Meanwhile, she slept like nothing was wrong. That night, I barely slept. The pieces were coming together, and I knew whatever was happening, it was bigger than she was admitting. The actual proof came fast, like the universe got tired of watching me doubt myself. 2 days after that argument, she forgot her tablet at home. It kept buzzing non-stop while I was working from the couch. Same notification sound, over and over. I told myself I wouldn't look. I lasted maybe 10 minutes. There it was. A full conversation. No flirting-coded ambiguity, no room for excuses. Complaints about me. Jokes about how clueless I was. Plans for hotels, not dinners. Photos I wish I could erase from my brain. She wasn't just cheating, she was comfortable doing it. My chest felt hollow, like someone had scooped something vital out of me. I wasn't shaking or yelling. I just felt cold. Detached. Like I was reading about someone else's life falling apart. Then the front door opened. She walked in early, saw me holding the tablet, and her face drained of color. For the first time in months, she had nothing smart to say. Just silence. That's when I knew there was no misunderstanding left to clear up. The silence didn't last long. She lunged for the tablet, snatching it from my hands like I'd stolen something from her. Then she went on the attack. Not apologies. Not shock. Anger. "What the hell is wrong with you?" she yelled. "You had no right to look through my stuff." I asked her, very quietly, how long it had been going on. She laughed, actually laughed, and said I was being dramatic, that it was just flirting that got a little out of hand. When I mentioned the hotel plans and the photos, her tone shifted again. Suddenly it was my fault. I hadn't been attentive enough. I was always tired. I didn't make her feel wanted. Every excuse came out rapid fire. She denied, minimized, redirected. When I called it cheating, she said I was using extreme language. When I said I felt betrayed, she told me I was trying to manipulate her with emotions. At one point she said, "If you were a better husband, I wouldn't have needed this." That sentence hit harder than anything else. It wasn't just that she cheated, it was that she felt justified. I realized then that the woman I was arguing with wasn't the person I married. And I wasn't sure she ever had been. After the yelling burned itself out, she switched tactics. Calm voice. Controlled breathing. Like she'd flipped a switch. She told me I was overreacting and that affairs weren't always black and white. According to her, it was complicated. According to her, I'd pushed her into it without even realizing. She said the guy meant nothing. Then 5 minutes later she said he understood her better than I ever had. She claimed she was planning to tell me. Then admitted she had no intention of stopping. Every sentence contradicted the last, and when I pointed that out, she accused me of twisting her words. I started doubting myself again, which scared me more than the cheating. I'd say, "You lied to me," and she'd respond, "You heard what you wanted to hear." I'd mention specific messages, and she'd say I took them out of context. It felt like standing on sand that kept shifting under my feet. At one point I asked her if she even felt guilty. She shrugged and said, "Guilt doesn't fix unhappy marriages." That was it. That was the moment something inside me shut down. Not anger. Not sadness. Just clarity. I stopped arguing. And she noticed. Her confidence wavered when she realized I wasn't playing along anymore. The house felt unreal after that. Too quiet. She went to the bedroom and slammed the door, then came back out like nothing happened, asking if I wanted dinner. I remember staring at her, wondering how someone could switch gears that fast. I didn't eat. I sat on the couch, replaying everything, every dismissed concern, every insult disguised as honesty. My hands were steady, but inside I felt wrecked. The anger drained out and left this heavy sadness behind, like grief for something that was already dead. Later that night, she told me she was going out to clear her head. I didn't ask where. I didn't ask with whom. She hesitated at the door, maybe expecting a reaction, a fight, something. When I just nodded, her eyes narrowed like she'd lost control of the situation. When the door closed, I realized something important. I wasn't scared of losing her anymore. I was scared of losing myself if I stayed. The next morning, I called my brother. I hadn't planned to. I just heard his voice and everything spilled out. Saying it out loud made it real in a way screenshots never could. He didn't interrupt, didn't try to fix it. He just said, "You don't deserve this." That sentence wrecked me. I'd spent weeks being told, directly and indirectly, that I was the problem. Hearing someone say the opposite cracked something open. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining things. I was reacting to being betrayed. When my wife came home later, she acted irritated that I seemed distant. She asked if I was still sulking. I told her I'd told someone what was going on. Her face hardened immediately. She said it was private, that I was embarrassing her, that I was turning people against her. Not once did she ask how I was feeling. Not once did she apologize. That night, I slept on the couch. Not because she asked me to, but because lying next to her felt unbearable. The next day, I told her we needed to talk, really talk. No yelling, no deflecting. I asked one simple question: was she still seeing him? She didn't answer right away. She sighed, rubbed her temples, and said she didn't want to be controlled. That was my answer. I told her I couldn't stay in a marriage where I was being lied to and disrespected. She laughed bitterly and said I was being dramatic again, that people worked through worse things than this. When I said the affair had to end if we were going to try, she looked at me like I'd insulted her. She said she needed space to think, but what she meant was freedom without consequences. I told her space was fine, but I wouldn't wait around while she figured out which life she wanted more. For the first time, I set a boundary and didn't back down. Her tone changed. She accused me of giving ultimatums. I told her I was choosing self-respect. That conversation didn't fix anything, but it ended something important: my willingness to accept less than honesty. After that conversation, I was a mess. Not angry all the time, mostly hollow. Some mornings I woke up and almost forgot what had happened, then it would all rush back. Nights were worse. I'd lie in bed, replaying every smile, every touch, every word she'd said over the past months, trying to figure out when it had started to matter less to her. I went through anger, then guilt that maybe I hadn't been attentive enough, that maybe I could have stopped this if I'd noticed sooner. Then came deep sadness, the kind that sits in your chest and refuses to leave. It wasn't melodramatic crying, it was quiet, constant, like a low hum of grief. Friends noticed. Family noticed. But explaining it was hard. You can't tell someone my wife betrayed me and I don't know if I can trust anyone anymore without sounding like a broken record. So mostly, I kept it to myself, hiding behind work and errands, pretending everything was normal. It was lonely. And it hurt more than I ever expected, not just because of what she did, but because I realized that someone you love can hurt you in ways you never saw coming. A few weeks in, I stopped hoping she'd change. No grand apology, no heartfelt I was wrong, no magical realization on her part. The truth settled like a stone in my stomach: she had made her choice, and it wasn't me. I started thinking practically. Could I forgive her and rebuild trust? I knew the answer before I even asked myself: probably not. Every small lie, every justification, every deflection had left permanent cracks. I realized that staying would mean constantly questioning everything, watching for the next slip, and never feeling safe in my own home again. So I began making plans, not dramatic, not impulsive, just careful steps to reclaim my life. Financially, emotionally, logistically. I spoke to a lawyer, quietly arranged a separate bank account, and started mentally rehearsing the conversations I'd need to have. It felt like gearing up for a storm I didn't want but couldn't avoid. And with that planning came a strange sense of relief. Acceptance didn't erase the pain, but it gave me a foothold. I wasn't a victim of her anymore, I was someone making choices for myself. I told her, calmly this time, that I was done. Not shouting, not begging, just stating facts. She froze, like she hadn't expected me to actually follow through. Her eyes darted, searching for a way to turn it around, but I didn't give her one. She tried everything: guilt-tripping, anger, even fake tears. "You're overreacting. We can fix this. You're throwing away everything we built." I didn't mean for this to happen. I listened, said nothing, let it all hang in the air. Then I said the words I needed her to hear: "I can't live like this. I can't trust you. I won't stay." The silence after that was heavy. She flinched, but didn't argue further. I realized in that moment that I wasn't just ending a marriage, I was reclaiming my life. For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of control, of clarity, of hope. It wasn't easy. She left the house that night, slamming the door behind her. But unlike before, I didn't feel panic or despair. I felt a strange, painful kind of freedom. The first few weeks alone were brutal. The house felt too big, the silence too loud. I kept expecting her to call, to text, to show up apologizing, but it never happened. And slowly, I realized I didn't need it to heal. I threw myself into things I'd ignored for years: work, friends, hobbies. I talked openly with people I trusted, cried when I needed to, and allowed myself to feel anger and sadness without shame. Every day was a little bit easier, every night a little less heavy. I also started setting boundaries with her when contact was necessary. No explanations, no justifications, no lingering what-ifs. Each boundary I held was a small reclaiming of myself. By the end of it, I wasn't the same person I had been at the start of this nightmare. I was more cautious, yes, but also stronger, clearer about what I deserved and what I would never accept again. Painful? Absolutely. But worth it. Looking back, I see now that I ignored the warning signs for far too long. I let my desire to keep the marriage normal blind me to the truth. But I also see that the experience taught me something crucial: self-respect isn't negotiable, and love isn't enough when trust is broken. I've learned to recognize red flags early, to value my instincts, and to never let someone's lies redefine my reality. Most importantly, I've learned that moving on doesn't mean forgetting, it means choosing yourself over the betrayal. If there's one piece of advice I'd offer to anyone in a similar situation, it's this: pay attention to the little things, trust your gut, and don't confuse love with obligation. It's painful, but letting go of someone who doesn't honor you is the first step toward reclaiming your life. I don't know what the future holds, but I know I'll face it stronger, clearer, and unafraid to protect my heart. And that, in the end, feels like a victory worth having.